Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be looking at a response to my last video, a few questions for AnCaps, that I tweeted at Mr. Dapperton, and he was kind enough to respond. Between his reply and you guys in both comment sections, I feel like it was received pretty well, and it's inspired me to break out my usual intro bits and make this video a little more flashy and investigate anarcho-capitalism a little further. I would like to address the points that Mr. Daps made and maybe provide some counterpoints and some more questions, and address some interesting comments I found in our comment sections. Now, before we light the fuse on this video and get things started, I would like to say I'm not actually trying to attack AnCaps or anything. I do realize that people enjoy firing shots at it, but I'm honestly more interested in voicing my concerns and questions with the ideas. I believe stupidity is born from an unwillingness to let your ideas be challenged or to challenge ideas. So today, in the interest of fighting stupidity, ladies and gentlemen, arm yourselves with some personal nukes and enjoy the show.
Let's say people do get tired of the US government and they decide to replace it with the private sector. Everything the government owns, guns, tanks, will be sold to private citizens, private militaries, and private security. But it'll mostly be bought off by private security and private military. As far as the nuclear bombs, they will all be recycled to create nuclear energy via power plants.
Fair enough. That's a pretty good answer. All of the government possessions get sold to the general public. Although, I did ask who gets the money and proceeds from selling all the assets, and you didn't answer this in the video, but I did scan the comment section and I did find your answer. So, I think I'm correct in assuming that it's going to work kind of like an auction, with the profits being redistributed to the now former taxpayers and citizens of AnCapistan. Now, this seems like a pretty reasonable answer to me, so if anyone has something to add, feel free to leave it in the comment section down below.
The only form of power they'd be getting is electricity.
Now, I don't want to misrepresent your position, and I've watched quite a few of your videos, but I guess I may have missed this, or maybe I didn't watch that one, so I'm not going to assume what your position is here, but I've gathered that there is a little divide in some AnCaps on whether personal nukes violate the non-aggression principle or not. As a matter of fact, there was a fellow who linked me his argument for the case of personal nukes in an AnCap society. Now, personally, I'm a bit of a pragmatist rather than an absolutist when it comes to the non-aggression principle. Hence the reason why, I'm a small government kind of guy. So the technicalities of it that he appeals to is, sadly, it's lost on me. However, if you are indeed an AnCap and you want to hear that argument or want to continue with it or whatever, I will leave a link to that video down below in the description. Side note, apparently minarchist is a word that I didn't know. Guess you learn something new every day. Anyway, I digress. Okay, I did find this comment as well. Why does this cock want to take away my recreational McNukes? And honestly, I think it would be indescribably hilarious to have my own nuke. Maybe if everybody's cool with it, we can have a nuke range set up for AnCapistan. Okay. Setting aside the part of me that loves explosions, what's your opinion on personal nukes? I direct this question both at Mr. Dapperton and anyone else who wants to throw in their opinion. Do they all have to be disarmed and dismantled and used for nuclear energy in your AnCapistan? What if the buyer disagrees and doesn't want to disarm it? Or what if they simply rebuild the nuke with the active components they get from it? Are you of a mind that nukes violate the non-aggression principle or not? Since people are entitled to their own property in AnCapistan, wouldn't taking away their nuke be a violation of the non-aggression principle? I mean, perhaps they've decided to make one on their own. Or is it such a dangerous device that its very properties goes against this principle? If you do think that nuclear weapons inherently violate the non-aggression principle, what if the person with the nuke can demonstrate to everyone that they can properly house and store it, effectively circumventing any harm it could do? I suppose you could just make the argument, who the hell wants to just own a nuke they will never use? And like I said, I would love to have my own nuke. Even if I couldn't use it, I'd be like, dude, you gotta see this. Come check out my nuke. I mean, seriously, okay? Collectors enjoy having things even though they will never use them. Either just to say they have them or admire them as an art piece. Now, I suppose you could make the argument, they could just buy a disarmed one, But what I've found, my observations for the most part, Most collectors pride themselves in having a functioning model of whatever it is that they're collecting. Personally, I think you need well-trained public representatives to store and house such a device for your country as a deterrent against other nations. But I also really kind of want my own nukes to play with. But anyway, I'm more curious to hear your positions on the matter.
Let me ask you a question. When has Walmart security turned against its customers because their competitor, Fry's, decided to pay them off? Or because some country paid them off? It's never happened. And it never will happen. And to state that that will happen is ridiculous. I'll tell you exactly why private security will never be bought off to attack AnCapistan, and why a government could never form in AnCapistan. If private security was bought off to fight AnCapistan, or a government started to form, that would require violence on their part, and that is against the non-aggression principle. If they attack you, which both groups would, you could legally kill them. This would be putting a giant bullseye on any enemies of AnCapistan. They'd basically be going to war against an entire society of people. And I'm sorry, a private security of 1,000 people can't kill millions of people. They just can't. As soon as just a little bit of government springs its ugly head up, they'd be shot dead in AnCapistan. Why? Because their job requires violence. And violence is something that you're allowed to respond with violence. So I don't want to hear any more of this, oh, what if government forms? Or what if private security gets bought off? Because both claims are ridiculous.
So I would like to address the statement that governments couldn't form in AnCapistan due to, by their very nature, being in opposition to the non-aggression principle. Let me give you a scenario. So let's start out by saying that AnCapistan is suddenly formed tomorrow. But me and my neighbors decide that we want to start our own unique community. One in which everyone agrees to vote figureheads to represent their collective household interests and run for, I guess, a head of our community. You know, someone to keep the books, make sure payments for our communal needs are in order and paid on time. Someone who we find to be really intelligent, that we believe in, and we believe will make good decisions to help our community thrive and grow. Maybe we've come up with the notion, the idea, maybe we think it's easier to pull all of our resources, have everyone who wants to be a part of this commit to donating a certain amount of money for the head of the community to pay for our own militia, police force, and services, to keep our community safe and in repair. Maybe we just think it's easier this way, okay? And everyone in our community who wants to participate and receive these benefits from our newly established community has to sign a contract to get in, stating that they have to abide by the rulings of the community and have agreed to pay a fee or suffer the repercussions if they fail to do so. Absolutely no one is forced to sign this contract. No one is coerced into it. It's entered into freely of their own will. Now, I could be wrong, but I think me and my community just established our own government without violating the non-aggression principle. I mean, in this contract that you have to sign to be part of the community, we can have in there, you break the rules, you've signed this agreement, you have to be investigated and punished by our community court if found guilty. You don't pay the community fee, and your membership is revoked, and you do not get to participate anymore. There is no need for there to be any violence or initiation of force in this at all, any more so than any company court would be able to impose. I'm sure you can sit there and argue, why would anybody do that? Why would people do that? Why don't they just, come together as a community and pay for these services, have each individual pay? But you know what? I'm sorry, but me and my community have made up our own insane little minds and committed to making this happen. So let's say that me and my community get all this done, everybody's happy with it. Are the people of AnCapistan going to come in and violate their own principles to stop us from forming our completely voluntary governing system? Alrighty, for the other point there, I can concede it would be an idiotic idea for a company of 1,000 men to go rogue in AnCapistan, and no one would really want to make an enemy of AnCapistan. However, in the scenario I proposed, an invading force could buy out those companies and just tell them to stand down. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't think that any part of the non-aggression principle states that helping those in need is compulsory. Yes, the reputations would suffer, but again, maybe some country has paid them enough to not have to worry about that. Maybe they're all set up for life now. Also, maybe they don't give a shit about the non-aggression principle, and whatever invading force has just bought them and added them to their military might. This, of course, brings up another interesting and important topic, how a war with AnCapistan would go, but I'll cover that here in just a second.
AnCapistan, like America, would be cherished for its freedom. There would be countries that would stick up and defend AnCapistan. So AnCapistan would be just fine. Also, even if no country did stick up for AnCapistan, it would still be fine. Not every country in the world needs a military as strong as the United States of America, the strongest military on the planet. There's 194 countries that don't have the strongest military on the planet, and they do just fine. So I'm tired of hearing this crap where, you need it to be stronger than America, or else your country is screwed. That is BS. That is simply not true. And AnCapistan will have a pretty good defense, and that's all it needs. It doesn't need more than that. They would have private militias, private militaries, private security, and the whole society will be armed to the teeth. The whole society will be the military. Anybody that could fight will fight. Let's say 20% fights. That's 64 million people. That seems a lot better than the 2 million people that are in the United States of America's military. 64 million versus 2 million. Who would you wage your bet on?
Alrighty, I've been a little excited, waiting to get to this part because Mr. Dapperton brings up a good point, and I think I have a few more good questions to throw in here. Now, there was a comment made on both of our videos, and I think it deserves a little attention, because it's often a point that I myself bring up in defense of the Second Amendment here in the USA, and why it's such a military advantage to have an armed populace.
Ever hear of Homeland Advantage? Vietnam? Revolutionary War? I may sound rude, sorry if I do, but worrying about invading countries is almost null and void.
Yep, that's the voice you get today. Sorry if I assumed your gender because of your feminine avatar. You have no one to blame but yourself. But anyway, yeah, invading a country like America would be the same as committing strategical suicide. And if I was invading a country, I wouldn't bum rush a place like America anyway. So let me propose to you an interesting question. What happens if a country does want to invade and they just decide to threaten AnCapistan with a nuke if they don't lay down their arms? I mean, sure, you do have a lot of nuclear power plants now, but you can't exactly strap rockets onto those and use them as a deterrent now, can you? This is of course assuming, yet again, that the international community does not intervene. But if they don't, you've got another real problem on your hands. Okay, quick side note here, I've got to be honest, I think AnCapistan relies on the virtue of others a bit too much for my taste. I mean, it seems like a lot of flaws seem to present themselves if you're a pessimist about the whole thing. That's just my opinion, but anywho, if you don't throw down your arms, they can just nuke a single city and make an example. After that, I feel like, people might just start raising the white flag. However, let's throw surrender off the table for now, because people of AnCapistan are strong and do not falter. They know no defeat. And let's be honest, no one who wants the USA is going to turn it into a radioactive parking lot to get it. That would defeat the purpose. Unless you're a rocket man who really just wants to mess your shit up because he just doesn't like you. That's something you might want to consider as well. But aside from appealing to the international community, how does AnCapistan deter a threat like that if it doesn't have nukes of its own? I mean, the primary use of having nuclear stockpiles in your country is not to use them, but to deter other people from using them against you. Do the people of AnCapistan fund the submarines, the carriers, the silos, and defense programs, the people to work in all those places? I mean, what if there simply isn't enough people donating money to it, to sustain it, to keep it running, to keep up, technologically, keep advancing the technology to keep up with the arms race? You can say, and I'm sure you will, well, Captain, clearly they will, okay? Clearly they will pay for this, they'll know it's important, but just humor me, okay? What happens after years and years of no threats and too many people starting to feel like they're wasting their money and funding drops to an unsustainable level? However unlikely you feel some of these scenarios I present may be, I think they are possibilities nonetheless. And just like in my last video, I'm interested in how you think these problems would be resolved if they did happen to arise. What path do you plan on taking to making your dreams and ideas happen?
Through education. Simply by changing the minds of the people. If everybody believed like me, starting tomorrow, nobody would go to work for government and government would just vanish. Voluntarily opting out, that's the solution. No violence necessary. I'm not a violent commie. I don't want to violently overthrow the government. I don't want to violently overthrow you and tell you how to live. I want you to come up with that decision on your own. And if we could all agree on AnCapistan, all the power to us.
That's good to hear. I prefer non-violent solutions to problems myself as well. But a lot of people follow that line of reasoning. You know the one. If everybody thought or believed just like me, we would all be a lot better off. Well, maybe not in my particular case. If everyone else thought just like me, it would probably end with us screwing things up beyond all repair, doing some stupid shit just because we thought it would be entertaining or out of curiosity. Anyway, I digress. A lot of people feel like the world would be a better place if everyone believed what they believed. My point isn't to mock you or belittle what you believe in, but doesn't it seem a little bit unrealistic and naive? It seems like a really unattainable expectation. If you need absolutely everybody to agree with your specific set of beliefs, I mean, it comes across as an almost impossible goal to reach. I mean, I think part of the reason why governing is so necessary is because you simply have too many people that don't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and they all feel really, really strongly about these issues. It seems like you would need some type of mediator to help compromise, something with checks and balances. It seems like a pretty tall order to get everybody to agree with you, or at least, enough people to believe in anarcho-capitalism so everybody just opts out of government. Speaking of when everybody finally opts out of government, I just thought of a pretty huge issue I think you would find pretty quickly. Let's say everybody just opts out of government and it collapses. Everybody just drops the whole damn thing. Well, as it turns out, the government that you just dissolved was trillions of dollars in debt. Don't you think its fall would bring a rise of a lot of conflict? I mean, the people our nation has borrowed money from aren't just going to throw up their hands and say, well, shit, I guess we're up that little brown creek without a paddle. There's no more America to collect from. How do you settle this dispute? Because it's going to come up. They're not just going to let this go, okay? Do you let these countries come in and take what they're owed? Do you give them so much of the land? Or do you give them nothing and consider them an aggressor when they show up to collect? And what about money? Almost everyone in the USA has this incentive to keep the US dollar afloat. In my opinion, that's going to be a big barrier to collapsing the government. I mean, do you want to try to get everybody to migrate to a cryptocurrency? Do we make AnCapistan dollars? What backs up that currency if you do? I mean, or do we adopt the currency of another country? See, this is why I asked how we prevent the country from becoming a bad playthrough of Fallout. I mean, do we just trade in bottle caps for a while? If the government is disbanded too quickly, you might be in for a total economic collapse. And I think until you solve, at the very least, that issue, you're going to have problem convincing people that dissolving the government is a good idea. I mean, especially when it could lead to all their assets being worthless and useless and they could end up starving. That they have a great incentive to go against what you're proposing. Or I suppose there is another option. You could just wait until the US collapses on its own. Let the US dollar collapse. I think there's a perfectly valid strategy in just waiting to see if the government consumes itself, then just, come in waving the ANCAP flag.
That would be an act of war. Your whole argument against AnCapistan seems to be, well, somebody could pick a fight with you, so therefore AnCapistan can't exist. AnCapistan and its allies are perfectly able to defend themselves. Look what happens around the world when big countries try to topple smaller countries for monetary gain. The whole world basically steps in and sticks up for that smaller country. There will be plenty of countries willing to defend AnCapistan. Not as if AnCapistan even needs it, because AnCapistan would have one of the toughest defenses on the planet. Right now, the toughest military on the world has a military of 2 million. AnCapistan would have a defense of 64 million. I don't care how tough that 2 million is. They're screwed. The people of AnCapistan could literally, legally own tanks, fighter planes, and fully automatic machine guns. Their defense is good enough. Listen to me. Listen to how tough this defense is. But people pretend like this is a weak point in AnCapistan. This is not a weak point. This is one of AnCapistan's strongest points. To say they will be invaded is literally retarded. Alright guys, if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe. I'll catch you on the next episode.
Hey, I think we should be able to own tanks and machine guns right now. Like I said, I am a firm believer in the Second Amendment, and I think we should be able to, at the very least, have comparable firepower in contrast to the government. Like it or not, I demand access to my miniguns and tanks. Hell yes! That aside, let me address the first part of that, okay? My main problem with AnCapistan is that it appears to rely too heavily on having virtually everyone agree with the fundamentals and principles. I just don't foresee you convincing enough people to convert a place like the United States into AnCapistan. Now, if you had a vacant country somewhere that you could fill with AnCaps, or I guess if you and all the AnCaps got together and, I don't know, bought your own country, I would be pretty excited to see how well it does. I think starting AnCapistan that way is perfectly viable. Although, I think inevitably you will have to contend with the wavering belief of the people, and the stability will suffer as you have people migrate in and out of your country. I'm not saying it's impossible or anything, I'm just saying I don't see it happening in a country like the United States of America, and I think it's going to have a lot of issues that are going to arise that will need to be overcome. I think it would be a grand experiment, and the whole world could learn a lot of lessons if a country like AnCapistan were to form somewhere. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed my second round of questions and comments towards Anarcho-Capitalism. A huge thank you to those who participated in the comment sections and to Mr. Dapperton for taking the time to respond to my video. I really do admire the passion you have for your ideas and beliefs. I hope at the very least this video has been thought-provoking and provides more substance for conversation. And apologies for this video being so long. I did have to cut most of my portions Mr. Dapperton was responding to, but if you want to see my original video or his original response, links will be down below in the description. Also, another huge thank you to my patrons and those who help support this channel. I also noticed a few more subs on my sub counter, so I'd like to say welcome aboard. Hopefully I don't scare you off when I release one of my usual videos. They're aimed a lot more towards taking the piss out of stupidity and the morons perpetuating patently bad ideas. Those videos usually aren't scripted like these past couple of ones. They're a lot more improvised. I like to use scripts on important videos, or I like to, get a thorough point across. The other ones are usually more about entertainment. But anyway, I digress. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, remember, keep fighting stupidity wherever you may find it. Have a good one.